I'm Mike Assenald, and welcome to the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge's AC23 Plus Artist Legacy Series podcast. This is a series where we talk to artists who are doing amazing things in the areas of the arts, including performance, education, production, as well as arts advocacy. We record this series in the Virginia and John Nolan Black Box Studio, as well as in the Jan and Bill Grimes recording studio here at the Carrie Siraj Community Arts Center. Be sure to visit artsbr.org for more information on all the great things we are doing here at the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge. Hope you enjoyed the podcast series, and thanks for tuning in.
Well, that was fun.
It was fun. Oh, man.
Man, what a pleasure. So
Yes.
for all my
All the listeners and viewers of AC23 Plus, the podcast series here at the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge, I'd like to welcome a dear friend of mine who I've known since he was just going into high school, I think. Mr. Jacob Dupre.
Yes, sir. So happy to be here.
Thanks for being here.
Yes.
So you're in town for about a week?
Mm-hmm.
And you're in town from?
From right now outside the Atlanta area. But before that, I was in Indiana.
Yep.
Working at Sweetwater. Some people may have seen me, and
I'm sure many people have seen you.
Product demos and other kinds of content and things. So,
well, it's great to have you here. And
yes.
My goal is to get into some cool things. I'd like to start though with just some history.
Right.
We were talking prior to recording just about, Baton Rouge has a rich musical history, and a lot of it is tied in directly to your family and the associations of your family.
That's right.
So get me started. So tell us a little bit about the legacy that you're part of and how you got started in music.
Right. Well, my family really goes back with music in this state quite a while. I commonly say I'm a fifth generation musician, because even before my grandfather, John Gerbrek, that a lot of people around here know because of his influence. Before him, it went back further than that, in the beginning of the 20th century. And one of my relatives, my ancestors, Uncle Pinky Gerbrek, nicknamed Pinky, he was a classical violinist and trumpet player also. And I'm going to get it right because, like I think I was mentioning earlier, every time I'm home, I check my mom on my facts, because she's sort of one of the family scholars. But he played, I believe, on the first live radio broadcast in New Orleans.
No kidding.
That was jazz. Yeah.
Wow.
And he played with Oliver Naylor, I think was the name. You can find some YouTube videos of people doing recordings of the records. But he was in that band, and there are recordings out there of him from the 20s. And that's my great uncle, or great uncle.
Okay.
So, and then it went past that in several generations down, and that led to my grandfather, Johnny Gerbrek. And it's being here this week. I'm here to play the Jazz Invitational that he and Lee Forche, his other good friend that you of course know, started. And 1967, this is the 57th year of that. Yeah. And so many things in just this community and music were shaped by those two guys. Yeah. So I guess I'm doing the prequel to my story. But I grew up with that. That's just very brief. There's so many other things. But I grew up with that legacy kind of in the rearview mirror for me to look at, that what my grandfather was already doing. But it was such a blessing, because when I was, I like to say I've been playing basically since birth, but in a way before, because my mom was playing gigs, who's a teacher here and a pianist, flute player, wonderful singer, of course, one of my first teachers, like the rest of my family, but she was playing gigs when she was pregnant for me. So
you were on the gig before you were actually.
I was on the gig. Yeah, yeah. I was already working and listening, and I do believe that probably shaped me.
Sure, it did. Yeah.
But yeah, and it goes for my brother John, who's a couple years younger than me. But we both grew up with that amazing musical family around us, with my grandfather playing trumpet, band director playing a smattering of many other instruments.
Right.
And then my grandmother, classical pianist. I was taking my first lessons with her when I was like 4 or 5.
Right.
So I like to think that, even if I tried, the music wasn't going to miss me.
Yeah.
Or my brother.
Yeah.
It just is ingrained in who we are. It's our legacy, and it's definitely ultimately always a blessing to have that background.
I'm curious, because I didn't have that sort of blessing, as though I like to think of it as, growing up in a musically rich environment.
Right.
So my question to you is, you're around on the gig in the womb, and then you're probably being, drug around to gigs even before you could really play.
Sure.
But at home,
yeah,
I'm sure there was music still going on constantly. Am I right in thinking that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it kind of sort of became a joke for a while, but pretty much every time there was a new grandchild born and they ended up at my grandparents' house, they had a cornet in their hand. He was having them blow a mouthpiece.
There's the bottle, and then there's the cornet.
Right. As soon as they're old enough to hold it, even if they can't hold it, he would kneel on the ground next to the little ones in our family and let them try whatever they wanted to try. And so I have awesome home videos, even of, my other cousins in from out of town at holiday times, and most of us don't know how to play that well when we're, between 5 and 10, but somebody gets put on the drums because the drums are always set up. Someone's on a piano and Granddaddy pulls out his trumpet, and before long it's a band. And it makes me think of the great bass player, Victor Wooten, talks about his family, how they weren't taught this music school, very academic thing from an early age. They just had instruments put in their hands.
Right.
And they were making music already. They weren't experts, and they were going to learn and grow, but we were making music together as kids before we even really knew what we were doing.
Right.
And that's really the beauty of that, of growing up in that.
So, I've just working in New Orleans for so long and meeting so many of very similar situations of just musical families, legacies. Sure. And they'll talk about, I was talking to one guy who's, the whole family's incredibly gifted, but he's like, we'd just be sitting at the kitchen table and eating dinner and we're singing harmonies.
Yep.
It's just, it's not a separate thing. Oh, I do this, then I go do music. It's just part of the life.
Yep, totally. Just like, the musical families, it's when we sing Happy Birthday, we're always doing it in harmony.
Right.
We're not doing the kind of not to judge people, but the Happy Birthday where it's, almost all keys are represented because somebody is singing, we are all hitting our harmonies at the end, and everybody knows where they're supposed to go. And
right.
I mean, we literally just did a voicemail to one of my uncles last night for his birthday, and we all did it without talking about it because we have
second nature
for years. And I mean, it's because I should elaborate more. I mentioned my mom, of course, Mr. Gerbrecht's daughter, so raised in that household of music, and then because of that, my growing up was very much the same. That she was having my brother John and I sing and play, and we were on gigs sitting in when we were, again, kind of too young to even get it, but it was, again, like you said, it wasn't like we're going to go do music now. It's just what our family did. So we were always singing. We were making music in church together. That was a big part of how our family started, kind of kept our tradition going, just with my mom and dad and my brother. So, but yeah, it was just always this community of musicians we had around us, more than just family. That was the other thing was, getting to interact with all my granddad's friends, and those guys were my first. I mean, when I was sitting in on jobs at like 10 years old, and Granddaddy would say, play snare drum, and I'm with guys like Lenny Capella and John DePaquier and him, and they're playing all the trad stuff, and I'm getting my education, and I didn't know it yet. But
yeah.
I mean, how amazing is that?
What do they say about the gig experiences? The test comes first, the lesson comes later.
Yeah.
So you're jumping right into it and doing it.
Yeah. Being put in the fire, but then being in a situation with musicians much older than you that are all teachers at heart too. And so
many of those were actual, that was their profession. They were teachers as well as performers.
Yeah. So I was always around that, like, people that loved seeing young musicians going through that journey for the first time.
Well, I'm curious if it's so second nature though, and part of the family. What was there a rigor aspect to it growing up? Like, I mean, did you have your mom or your dad saying, you need to practice now, or did that even exist, or you're just always practicing?
Well, I'll say this: my brother and I have the misfortune, maybe, of growing up just right in the craze of the video game era. Luckily, I was a little before social media up until high school, so I was less perhaps distracted by a lot of different things. But there were definitely those times that, you know, when we were really young, there was definitely encouragement. You know, just, okay, you know, you played Halo for 2 hours, go do your classical stuff before, because you know, Mr. Deloney's not going to be happy if you can't play the sonata tomorrow, you know. Right. And for a while, it would have to be a little encouraging, but it didn't take long, really, for the both of us to want to start doing it, you know. Right. And I mean, I think I always loved it, but there was definitely like those early years of encouragement. But it was always good encouragement. You know, it wasn't, definitely never felt like it was you know, like a fated thing that I had to be a musician. For instance, my dad, who's playing trumpet tonight in the Baton Rouge Jazz Ensemble, which is, I'm going to be sitting in and playing with them. Right. He's an engineer. He's a civil engineer, and that's one of the cool things about that band. All those guys do something else, you know, and they're still playing. So, but for me, I remember you told me, you know, you used to tell a lot of students you got the bug. I definitely got the bug probably earlier than a lot, because I had this family that was encouraging me. But I mean, I was in love with it at one point and knew that was what I was going to do.
Now, would you? I know you know, studied a lot of different types of music and are adept at probably any type of music. But most of the people that I've talked to, or you know, had maybe on this podcast or just in other situations, they generally identify themselves, I guess, if they had to pick something, as their core being a jazz musician. How do you think of yourself, or does it even matter to you?
I think my early journey, because I started with kind of traditional classical training, but then a lot of people in my family play jazz too, so I was hearing that. Up through high school, I probably would have said I was a jazz pianist. Right. Because that was what I spent the most time studying. And I played classical too, but that was how I thought of myself and defined myself. But that wasn't the only music I listened to. Although I feel like in recent years I've branched out to other genres, and I definitely, you know, as I think a lot of people do, they get into school to learn jazz and classical, and there's a certain air about academics in those genres that sometimes, you know, not maybe that they don't like other genres, but it's just not as discussed. You know, it's sort of that pop stuff, you know, that you might have to play to make money one day, but it's not the art, you know. But what I've like is that there's art in everything. Right. And a lot of the music that came before me, I mean, I was an old soul from the beginning, playing these old jazz tunes, and my friends were listening to Justin Timberlake, and I had no idea when I was that age, really, of that stuff. But then I got older, and then, you know, my parents are playing me the music from the 70s and the 80s, and I'm like, oh, okay, these guys like had it figured out. Like they figured out how to blend groove with the harmonies and the stuff in that old music that I fell in love with early. Right. And now it's like I identify myself just as a musician that wants to play the good stuff. Right. And it doesn't have to just be jazz, you know. I mean, without jazz, we wouldn't have most of the pop we have. So, right. You know, and I just I look at it all now as this big tree and all these branches. Yeah. And yeah, basically any music that gets me tapping my feet, that has some decent chord progressions, I'm probably on board. Right. And any other levels of complexity are welcome, of course. But
yeah, it's funny.
That's the good stuff.
When I think about just dealing or working with students over the years, and especially if we're dealing with the jazz vocabulary, or just becoming a, quote, jazz musician, I would always kind of point out to them that, you know, the goal here is not to necessarily be a jazz musician, but I think if you're going to go down that rabbit hole to a, you know, notable degree, it's going to get you to develop a lot of things that will allow you to do other forms of music. Not that they're easier, but it's just, you know, your ears are developed to a certain point, your techniques develop, your creativity is developed. There's so many musical skills that go along with that genre.
Yeah.
Again, depending on how deep you go.
It's kind of like jazz is a prerequisite to play the rest of American music.
I think so.
After it. If
Yeah.
you've gone through that, there's probably not going to be anything you can't handle, or at least approach,
Right.
Because I know I'm not an expert at, I don't know, playing exactly in the Western swing piano style.
Right.
But I've done it a little bit, and I can hear it because I've got the jazz ears that I've worked on, and I hear the similarities into what I know how to do. And usually it's like crafting a version of yourself that fits in the genre when you're kind of thrown into a moment like that. Maybe you have time to really learn something, but you're right. That's what that background gives you. You can be a chameleon,
Right.
kind of at will,
Yeah.
Where I know, because I do a lot of videos and content online on jazz, and I know that there's, because I have a lot of friends like this, there are a lot of musicians that come heavy from the rock background, and they're hungry to know more about jazz harmony, and a lot of those guys and gals, they can hear it, and they know, but they're like, but I want to get it, and
Yeah.
and it's like, here you go, buddy. You ready? You ready? It's gonna be quite a journey, but you're gonna be glad you took it.
It's funny. I was doing a little thing the other day with a very, very talented guitar player who I'd really just met. We'd been communicating via phone, but actually played together the other day. And I mean, just very, extremely ear-oriented. Would be the first to tell you he doesn't read and all that business. But so we're just kind of, figuring out some stuff to play. And he's, he knows all the country vocabulary really, really well, which I have a lot of respect for. But he was got on we're just talking. He's like, yeah, man, I heard this guy, and I think he was playing like a F blues scale over a D7 chord. And then I look at him like, okay, buddy. Because I know he just loves music, and he's got wonderful ears. And I said, okay, do you want to go down this hole? And he's like, yeah, man. So I was like, well, he's probably playing like a D alter type of thing. What is that? And I'll play it, and he plays it right back at me. And I'm like, so it's just a matter of putting a label to what he can already hear.
Yes.
But he just loved, to your point, like that hunger of just, which I love. Like, I hope I never lose that, of just that curiosity and wanting to always learn and get better.
Yeah. Yeah, there's sort of a process after you have gone through enough music of like learning and relearning, and then you spend time away, and it's almost to the point where I can rediscover something, a voicing, a tune I hadn't played in forever, a whatever, and go, oh, I probably did that one time, but I'm revisiting it. And that's part of the thing I found is like I can get excited about something again, almost like new, but that's kind of what's fun about it. It's just kind of revisiting your catalog. That's the stuff that's there that you don't even know is there, anymore. And then when it comes time to play, it just happens, which is how you want.
Well, so you're in Baton Rouge. You go through high school. That's where I had the pleasure of working with you.
Yes.
And then you leave, and I know the answers to some of these questions, but I'll kind of prompt you. So you went off to New York, correct?
That's right.
You went to the Eastman School of Music Conservatory.
Yeah.
And how was that?
Oh, it was amazing. Well, and I should say, now that you mentioned it, that in early years, it was a musical family, but in high school, it was really mostly you and Willis Deloney at LSU.
Who was my teacher, so this is all very family
connected. I know. And then even I think you took like a lesson with my grandmother one time when you were like a little boy.
Yeah, probably
like
so.
10 or something.
Yeah.
It's so insane.
And we could go even further, like, your grandfather ended up being the band director for my kid.
Yeah.
And, it's just whatever.
Yeah. And because I definitely remember like doing probably summer bands and then coming here and doing classes with my mom and working with your kids.
Right.
So it's just this big circle of students and teachers that keeps going. It's so cool. But I mean, you and Willis prepared me for those college years. I couldn't have seen it any better. I honestly remember the conversations with my mom about, you think you want to go to NOCA? You think I would take you to New Orleans to do that? And it was like, nah, man, we got Mike Esson and we got Willis Deloney right here. I had everything I needed, and I was so thankful for that. Nothing against NOCA, but of course. But Baton Rouge had everything I needed to get ready, and then Eastman School of Music for college.
And just from a culture standpoint. I mean, you're in Rochester, New York,
Right.
as opposed to South Louisiana. So what was that like?
Oh, I mean, it was, well, in all ways, not just music ways, of course. It was a growing experience because there are people internationally that come to that school. So, you know, I brought my South Louisiana roots with me, though, because we just played Basin Street Blues.
Right.
I think I remember one of my first performances, I was still really hanging on playing the trumpet a lot, you know, and so I brought it to class, and we did a version of Basin Street Blues where I had played most of this like combo performance on keys, but then got up and played trumpet because, you know, I was bringing that New Orleans vibe with me and that music that I grew up playing. But, you know, that was a cool thing to bring with me because when it was time to study Scott Joplin or talk about stride piano, I felt like I was kind of already ready. Like I kind of understood it. But then I got introduced to bebop and all the modern styles. Stuff I was breaking into with you and obviously had a background on, but getting it in a school in New York from teachers like Bill Dobbins, Harold Danko, who toured with Chet Baker and Lee Konitz and all these people. And I was sitting there next to these guys trying to absorb everything for the years I was there. And then, you know, of course, it was worth every penny, and it gave me the tools I have now. So.
Now I got to ask you, particularly about Bill Dobbins, because I had a chance to meet him when I guess I was right out of high school, and one of our mutual friends, Dr. Bill Grimes, had brought me up there for a summer thing and was around him, and then consequently I've studied books that transcription books he's done of Claire Fisher and all these, you know, to me just monumental transcribing tasks that he does. So, but what was that like, studying with a guy like that?
Well, definitely there was an intimidating part of it, because his sort of, I mean, I know it's a word that's used maybe too much sometimes, but his genius was something that I think every student knew about before they went to study with him. You know, so I knew, you know, real quick. Water.
Okay.
What did I do with it? I don't mean to stop the story.
It disappeared on us.
I have all the keys in front of me, but I drank it all.
Bill,
I must have drank
where
it
are
all.
you, man?
Oh, look. Perfect. You know, puberty was a long time ago, but I hear myself cracking these words, and I'm like, you know, just, you know, you can get so close to these things, and there's so much proximity effect. It just sounds so warm.
Yep, I know.
But yeah, with Bill, part of it was definitely intimidating, but then, you know, I know I heard a lot of things that he could be you know, kind of a tough teacher. But when I had him, for the most part, he was just so willing to share his knowledge and very generous with his time. He had a sign-up sheet that was on his door all the time with slots, I think 30-minute slots. Any student at any time could go sign up to spend time with him. And I definitely, I mean, I don't think I ever could have felt this way, but I don't think I could have felt like I took enough advantage of it. Even though I did do it a few times, I know I probably should have done it more, because I could go in there and play him something, and then he would sit down and do something else, and I would just get, you know, my mind blown pretty much every time and learn something. But I got to take, I mean, my best class I got to do with him was a comp class, and we went through part writing and that kind of thing. Yeah. And his sort of school of doing that is very unique, starting with like, you know, 5 voice, 4/3, really getting into that like Jerry Mulligan kind of, you know, linear stuff that just is also locking up vertically, and he's such a master at that. That's that Claire Fisher element in what he does. But then we went through all these composers and had to write like specific composers. We had an assignment, write a Bill Evans tune, write a Jerry Mulligan tune. And boy, I ate that class up. It was great. That's one I wish I could just go take again.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Just for one semester. Try to remember it all.
Well, and that makes sense, because one of the books I had by him, it was basically him composing tunes in the style of and it would be from Keith Jarrett to Bud Powell to Bill Evans, just all the masters, and all the tunes were like dead on.
Yeah. Have you seen his thing I think it's on YouTube now, of him playing through, I think it's All of Me he used as like
I haven't seen
the progression. And he goes through Oscar, Willie Lyne Smith. I mean, people from like every era and plays the tune. He wrote all these things, he composed them, but it's just, you have to find it on YouTube. Yeah. He talks about each player, and then does this brilliant thing where he sounds like exactly like Art Tatum, and then he just shifts, and now it's going to be Bill Evans, and now it's going to be Chick Corea, and it's just So I mean, to be around somebody like that, another blessing, another privilege, that makes that's what, when people ask, because I get asked a lot actually by young students that I teach, should I go to college for music? And I usually tell them, it's like, if you want to study with people like that, it's usually the best way to do it.
Right.
I know so many people want to teach themselves now because of YouTube, and there are great YouTubers and creators out there that are making stuff
like yourself.
Oh, thank you. That's on par with a lot of what they get at a school. But, like I said, to sit next to a teacher like that for some years is you can't replace that, I don't think.
Well, and also I think there's something about one-on-one being with a mentor who's really checking out you.
Yes.
And your strengths. And, of course, a great teacher recognizes the weaknesses right away and hopefully doesn't beat you down about it, but just kind of tries to find constructive, fun, creative ways, inspiring ways to deal with those things.
Yeah. I used to think, especially with my lessons with Harold in schools, it was almost like jazz therapy, It's like it was like sort of like going to the doctor, not like, oh, you're sick, I have to fix you, but just kind of like, again, somebody that can kind of diagnose your playing and see the things you can't see and give you that one phrase that you're going to remember for the rest of your life and teach your students one day that changed your playing and moved you in the right direction. And that's the cool part. One of
a story that I like to tell that's related to that, because one of the great teachers I had that was able to study with, who was just a great player, but to me, just a wonderful teacher. And this is why, because the first time I met Alvin Baptiste, I went in and played for him. And this is, I'm in a group of people, guys my age, students my age. And, he's the elder mentor. But it's the first time I'd met him. And he said, well, play something for me. So, I wanted to impress him. So I played, some jazz tune. And he's like, and I improvised. He said, oh, man, that, he had a great sense of humor, which I loved about him. He's like, yeah, Michael, that was great. Look. I'm going to play this melody on the clarinet. I want you to follow me. I said, okay. And I'm like, I'm trying to hang, but I'm kind of, I'm having trouble. And he's like, yeah, you see, Michael can play giant steps, but I got him with Frosty. So he did it with a sense of humor, but he made it painfully clear to me that you need to work on your ears more.
Yeah.
So that's all it took.
Right. Right. Well, that's great. Teachers can do that. You come in thinking you've already reached like one of the highest levels of complexity and you're ready to work on this. And then they just go, can you play a nursery rhyme in any key?
Right. And
can you play the chord changes to it? And can you improvise then on that tune? Mm-hmm. And that seems so silly and simple to do maybe to some, but it's definitely not.
Yeah.
It's definitely like that's the real test is when you have to do stuff like that. So when you are playing your Christmas gig and the singer says Frosty and B, because that's where my break is and that's where I want to, you're ready. You're so ready for it.
Exactly.
And then you can play giant steps changes over Frosty. And now,
which you're likely to do on a YouTube mashup.
Probably. Yeah.
Which I want to talk about later.
Yeah, we should talk about that. Definitely.
Well, let's get through the school stuff. So you finish up at Eastman.
Right.
And then, am I right? Did you go straight to UT to get a master's, or was there in between?
I did go straight, yeah.
Okay.
Moved to Austin, Texas, study. And the cool thing, and this goes back to the high school, there's a lot of Eastman alum that I come across, and the teacher there is Jeff Helmer, who went to Eastman as well. And I mean, just another great player for me to absorb and learn from. And in Austin, that was kind of where I started. You talked about identifying myself as a mostly jazz musician or not. That was where that mold was broken more and more, because through a lot of the professors at school playing at the Elephant Room, which is like one of the main jazz clubs downtown, I was exposed to musicians of all genres, guys like some good John Blondell, who was a bass player and trombone player. What's fantastic about him is he could do Watrous, like kind of just like him. And then he also would sit down and play electric bass, and he had played with Joe Henderson before. He had also played and toured with Willie Nelson. So it was, I was in this different musical culture kind of Texas sort of too. So that was where country music and playing rock, and it was a crazy night where I played with Kenny Rogers and Chris Christopherson on the same stage. I'll never forget that. And it's not to drop names, but just to push the point that I got exposed to some my jazz bubble was burst more there. And it's like you said, it's that thing of figuring out, how can I use this stuff now? And okay, I got to play B3 now in a rock band.
Right.
I got to sit down and play like a Western swing tune with a singer with some horns.
Yeah.
Similar in so many ways to what I was already doing, but still new. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, so you did get your master's there.
I did.
And then what happened after that?
Well, after that, I did a little touring with the Glenn Miller Orchestra.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is a amazing story, because I mean the band's been touring pretty much nonstop pretty much since its inception. And I had the privilege of touring in Japan for a month. Yeah. Which is probably still, hopefully I'll do more international touring, but that so far has been it, and it was such a highlight. It was great. But yeah, I toured with them for just a few months, but then this place, Sweetwater, rung me up. Well, or I guess I rung them first, and then they luckily called back. And I spent some great years there.
So what gave you the idea of calling? Like, what was your mindset there?
Well, that's a good story, is because I was in Austin, and I was done with my master's, and I was playing gigs, and I was having a great time there, playing with musicians and just gigging locally. But, you get to that point in life where it's like, okay, you got to have something. You got to do a job.
Right.
And I was looking for what that was, and teaching was obviously something I was interested in pursuing, coming from a family of music educators. I knew that. But one of my friends from Eastman sent me this job posting that he just said, hey, I know you've got like a YouTube channel, and you seem to be into recording and technology. You might like this gig. And it was for the keyboard artist at Sweetwater. And I just, grabbed a Nord from a friend and did a demo on a keyboard and tried to do my best to kind of play and demonstrate and do that thing. And, when I was on the road with GMO, they called me and said, hey, we'd love to have you come out. And so as soon as I flew home, actually, like I get on a plane and I go up there and meet all those wonderful people. And, did that gig. And that gig was really comprised mostly of being on YouTube, and new keyboard products would come in. I got to figure out how to use it, sometimes with enough time, sometimes with little time. And it was a really rewarding few years that I got to spend. And again, just kind of like everywhere else I've been, I made great friends, and through osmosis learned new skills.
And for the viewers who, for the one or two viewers who aren't familiar with Sweetwater, I mean, they're basically a mammoth company within the retail music industry.
Still the largest online music retailer.
They are the largest.
The largest, yeah. And that's been for some years now.
Wow. So what a great opportunity for you. I mean, just I know when you started working there, and I may not even known that you were working there, because I generally try to keep up with former students, but all of a sudden I start seeing you. I'm like, oh, check that out. Because I shop there.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's been kind of the fun things in some of that time, like being recognized randomly in the airport, oh, you're, Sweetwater guys. And I had heard from those other guys, like, yeah, that's going to happen because I mean, and that's Sweetwater has become kind of the top destination for music gear, and it was a privilege to be there because so we've talked a lot about my playing, but now a thing with more new technology is being able to record yourself from home, understanding software, computer, DAW, getting into a recording studio, a real one.
Mm-hmm.
That all that stuff happened for me there.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, it was like, in a lot of ways it felt like I was still going to school, which I think a lot of the best jobs are like that.
Yeah.
Because you feel like you're still learning at the same time.
Yeah.
Made great friends that were engineers in Nashville for years, and musicians that were touring with all kinds of people, not jazz people. I was in a lot of ways like kind of almost on an island sometimes, because I felt like I had this born in South Louisiana, jazz background, went to school, and then I'm meeting guys that just had different experiences.
Right.
They were more in the rock world, or they were more in the country world,
Mm-hmm.
or they come from the engineering producer side, but they also play. And it was cool to get to know those guys.
Yeah.
And work with them and make records, get to record in Sweetwater Studios.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really, and that's a good point, is that I don't think I did one like solidly jazz thing in that studio in 5 years. It was
Mhm.
mostly I get thrown in with a singer-songwriter. I got to play B3 on a prog thing and
Right.
turn the distortion all the way up and just play as many notes as I can. And
Right.
I just had a ball doing that stuff.
Yeah. It sounds like it would have been a lot of fun.
It was, yeah. Amazing. Yeah.
Well, so is that kind of when nowadays you have such a large social media presence, and you're doing all these kind of cool, and one of the things I really dig about what you're doing is it always comes with a sense of humor, which I really, really dig. I think that's just, ideally most music should always have that.
I think so too.
Of course, there's situations where if you're playing Rachmaninoff, it might not be that funny, but
right.
But that's one of the things that makes it just fun to watch, and you like the more educational stuff you're doing. It's always packed with some humor, and it's just fun.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
is that kind of where you started really kind of getting deeper into that when you were at Sweetwater?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just before, and again, that was kind of why that one of my best friends I had in school thought of me, because this was a little over 10 years ago, and I mean, YouTube, was a thing then, but it wasn't then what it is now.
Right.
The whole idea of a content creator, I don't even think was really being said like in 2014 or so.
Mm-hmm.
But I was making YouTube videos on my own and wanting to learn more about doing that, because I knew that was one of the many new ways musicians are making livings,
Right.
making content and kind of sort of building businesses around that. But then I get to Sweetwater, and now I've got one of the largest companies in the music industry selling gear, and I'm doing it for them. And so
Right.
that's why in so many ways it was like school, because I, got to meet people that were editing the videos and the guys that were doing sound in the room, and is a whole production team that's making this content every week, every day, every week. So it was, that was really where it started. And then, but sort of my Instagram stuff that's been happening, that really came sort of towards the end when I was there. There was a push to do more social media, because I feel like, I kind of like to say, for a long time, people were only watching like this, but more and more, your phone being upright now TikTok and things like that have sort of taken over.
Right.
Although YouTube is still a place where people definitely go to learn stuff, where I feel like TikTok is for that serotonin bump and just keep.
Right.
But I was making some stuff for them, and I kind of got to cut my teeth on, okay, what can I do on social media that people will find engaging? This mostly jazz musician, keyboardist, but that I've kind of grown to just throw myself at every genre of music without judgment. And I've also got a little kind of a weird sense of humor. It's like, so what can I do? And so that's when I started, kind of, I think probably if I was going to say some influences, bands like Dirty Loops or Jacob Collier.
Yeah.
I mean, there's kind of this trend that started years ago of the sort of next gen musicians taking pop classics that are maybe a little bit more high musically minded and just taking it all the way there.
Yeah, turn them through the ringer.
Just turning it up, turning up the Coltrane to 11.
Right.
You know,
Right.
which maybe takes the fun out of it for some people. But I know that now there's an
There's
audience.
plenty of people who are paying attention.
There's an audience that thinks it's fun, you know, and lately it's been the mashup thing, you know, like taking, you know, Heart, and then
Stravinsky.
and I was like, that's not the right chord, but that's the rhythm, and you know, so yeah, it's become a sort of a slight addiction, and I find it fun, and I think I always aim to make it musically satisfying enough to make a good joke or to make a good impression or just to make somebody go, wow, I couldn't have thought of that. That's nuts, you know, because that's the reaction I love to get. You know, it's just the
Right. That's funny.
Yeah.
At some point, I want to get a little techie with you because I'm just curious about some things. But before we do that, we've been doing a lot of talking, and I would, if you don't mind, I would just love to go back to the acoustic world, so to speak, and just hear you play something solo piano.
Okay.
Whatever you're hearing.
All right.
job, man. Bravo. Yeah, I love it. Could I get a lesson next tomorrow?
No. You don't know how to do that. No.
That was killer.
Thanks. Yeah.
Of course, that was Henry Mancini's Days of Wine and Roses.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
I have a funny story. Years ago, I met Ginny Mancini, his wife.
Yeah.
He of course, he had passed, but then she was up in age. But she told a story of that song, and a buddy of, they called him Hank. A buddy of Hank's was talking to him and says, "Yeah, man, I was watching that movie, but I have to confess I fell asleep. And how did it end?" And without missing a beat, Hank goes, "French horns on a high C. How else would it end?" Okay, so going back to the stuff that you're doing for YouTube or Instagram.
Right.
Okay, so like what kind of DAW are you using for that? How do you do not to get too in the weeds, but
sure.
in general, how are you doing this stuff?
For those that have taken the plunge into that, I saw a funny meme or something that was talking about like that if you could go back in time before that moment that you like started using a DAW for the first time, all the time and the sadness that it would save you from having to experience.
Right.
It was kind of I was like, oh, that kind of works, but I'm glad I know how to do it all. It's just for people that have gone to that dark side of recording, they will understand a little bit of that feeling. But yeah, with DAW, that was one of the cool things being at Sweetwater was that I got to kind of use almost all of them. At least the ones that they were using. So I've done a little bit of Pro Tools, a little bit of Ableton. FL Studio, which is a weird one because that's really, well, for me, because I'm more of a, piano composer type, and that's what a lot of beat makers are using. So, but I kind of had to put myself in the mind of some of these other kinds of musicians or creators, music creators, and figure it out. And now what I really landed on was Logic Pro. That's usually what I'm using.
Yep.
Just because for what I mostly do, which is composing, arranging, sometimes doing film score stuff. It handles that well enough for me for what I do. I know there are always the guys that would tell me, Cubase, man, you're missing out. Like, you got to go learn Cubase. And I'll go, okay, when I have the free a second life, I'll go learn a new DAW.
Right. I've always felt that way. Well, with DAWs as well as just like notation programs and so forth.
Yeah,
it's like
similar.
I think ultimately, unless I guess some can go deeper than others, maybe, but at the end of the day, it's just there's a learning curve in all of them. Yeah. So it's what you can use most effectively, and a lot of times in the real world, in a time crunch, that'll get the job done.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's what I got to, kind of learned from getting to experiment with and play around with a lot of software at Sweetwater. It's like the software isn't what makes you make music. Just like, having, I don't want to break anybody's heart, but having like Paul McCartney's guitar probably won't make you sound like Paul McCartney, or Steve Vai's guitar, or it might be cool to have. Oh, I know it's cool to have. I wish I had Oscar Peterson's piano. That would probably be great. But
there's an operator element to this.
Yeah, there is. there's the kind of things of guys like that. You could put a bunch of clothespins in front of them on a string and they could still play it. It would still sound like music. So, but yeah, so it's never, it can't be said enough. It's like, don't forget to develop the rest when you're getting into your gear addiction and starting to learn that stuff. You know? But it's a great tool. Now I've through my time at Sweetwater, I had no choice but to get better at that stuff, because so much of what they sell musical instruments, but it's all the software and gear, interfaces, monitors, all the stuff that recording engineers are using to make the best records out there now. So I got used to that, got the home studio going. I'm pretty happy with composing. That's actually how I spend a lot of time these days. Of course, I still love to play and I gig and tour when it's cool, but I do love just opening a new project with an idea and crafting every little bit of it. it's fun to have your hands on that like that.
I'm a believer.
Yeah.
Just to be, to be in the creative process and just exploring.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's just kind of looking for new ideas and,
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what I was going to ask you, like, post Sweetwater, and you said you live in just outside of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what are you excited about right now? I guess that would fall into composing, and is there any other thing that, that's kind of on the horizon that you're,
Yeah. I'm excited about, the social media thing and the videos I'm doing have led to some interesting collaborations that I'm kind of always working on.
I saw one name in that. I just know that you're working with Adam Neely.
Yeah. Well, so I came across Adam from being in this jazz fusion band, Everything Yes. And we did a tour alongside Sungazer, which is his group. And so, it was just cool to meet Adam because he's become again, we're talking about YouTube, he's one of those guys that so many people know now, like Rick Beato or Charles Cornell is another one that's a pianist. It was just good to see him and pick his brain a little bit about YouTube when, he was a wonderful guy. It was cool to hang with him for a little bit. What I'm excited about now is, just kind of seeing where this content creation thing is going to take me. And it's done some interesting things, because lately I started with kind of focusing on older music, but now I've started to kind of, go after Snarky Puppy or, it's kind of like who's he going to put his crosshairs on this week?
Right.
And it was a cool thing, like recently, like Mark Lettieri, I think is how you say his last name, this Snarky Puppy's guitar player. And I did something from his band.
Yeah.
And he like commented and it was like, can I post it? That's so crazy.
Yeah.
I matched him up with Katy Perry. So it was firework, but it was like, really dark, like, baby, you're a firework, man. And it's like, just, again, elevating simple pop music with some layer of complexity that just...
I mean, does that moment ever happen where your wife is like, what are you hearing? You're in the next room, like, what are you doing?
She is my beta tester, really.
Right.
This is the other thing that I'm excited about. It dovetails into that is songwriting and doing really songwriting, not like jazz composing, but writing songs with lyrics in various pop styles. And there's a really long album of music that I'm currently working on with a guitar player friend of mine, and it kind of ranges rock, R&B, funk. I obviously need that jazz background for all the things, so that's why it's been fun. But for my wife, with whether it's those songs like that, or crazy mashups, I always kind of want her to hear it because she hears music totally different than I do.
Right.
I do feel like I'm glad in so many ways that my partner is somebody that doesn't have a brain like mine.
Right.
Because the way she hears music is how a lot of people hear it, which is top down. If she's listening to the lyrics, she always says, the lyrics good? Does it have a good story? Obviously, it's got to make her move, but that's what most pop music built on, is it's got to have a great story that connects with people and great rhythm. If it really has those two things, it's probably going to succeed. So even when I'm playing her crazy mashups, I played her the Katy Perry, Snarky Puppy thing, and she was like, she had the stank face. And when you get the stank face, and she was into grungy.
It's a compliment in the highest regard.
Exactly. Well, she was into a lot of music that I maybe wasn't at, in younger age. She went through the 2000s rock stuff and but also loves all the old stuff I do. So, and she memorizes lyrics like nobody else. I wish I could do that. I'd be a lot more useful on gigs if I had her lyric brain.
Right.
But I love now just trying to expose her to the things I'm doing to sort of get that, non-ingrained music ear opinion of things. And so, but sometimes she does, I'll admit, sometimes she hears stuff and she goes, that's pretty weird. I mean, that's
I mean, will there ever be a time where you kind of nix it, or you just go a different direction?
yeah,
as a
sometimes.
result?
Yeah,
Okay.
sometimes. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I I've gotten into Melodyne and more and more levels of pitch shifting and correcting, and I go as deep as I feel like I need to, and there's always musical elements that aren't exactly lining up in these things, but what I interpreting about people is that they kind of get that part of it,
Right.
and maybe it's the humor, and it's enough of it that kind of works. It just makes you go, oh, that's it's almost good, That's what a lot of people say is like, wait, why does this kind of work?
Right.
That's probably the main comment I read,
Right.
So I try to get it to work well enough to have some type of positive effect on people. But there are plenty Logic projects sitting in my computer of stuff that I started and stopped. Just some stuff I just go, oh man, this is kind of gross. I don't think I'm going to be able to, I don't think this one's going to ever come out.
Well, imagine on the flip side of that, sometimes, you're ever like, wow, this really worked even better than I thought it would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Or a lot of times what I love is it's something like, a lot of times it'll happen like, let's see if I can do it with like the Katy Perry thing is like, if I might do something where like I move the melody up like a fifth. So if this is the root, now it's like, and now all of a sudden it's same shape,
Right.
slightly different chromatic thing in there. But I'll make those little discoveries, and that's what keeps me doing it. Because when it happens, I just I start howling, laughing at how ridiculous this is, and I'm doing this. And then what's been cool too is the suggestions people give me are often way wackier than I could ever. That was why I did Beyonce with Snarky Puppy, because it somebody suggested that, and I was like. Even before I knew what tunes I was going to do, and I was like, I have to make this work, even if it gets kind of weird in the middle of the process, and I'm maybe thinking about trashing. It's like, no, I got to see this one through, and that's what I usually do. Is if the idea is wacky and it makes me smile, I force myself to get through it. It's like I'm gonna make something out of this because I'm already getting a good reaction, just of the concept.
Right.
It's kind of it almost makes me feel like how joke writers probably are like. On SNL, if they just kind of shooting, the thing on the side and they start laughing about something they haven't even written yet.
Right.
It's like, oh,
right. Yeah, there's something there.
This is going in on Saturday.
Right.
This is going in.
Man. Well, look, Jacob, it's been a real pleasure having you.
Yeah, thanks,
I'm so glad you could do this.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to see you later tonight for the Forshay Gorbreck Invitational.
That's right.
So that's going to be a lot of fun. And we kind of talked about sending the listeners and viewers off, maybe going back down to South Louisiana and doing something kind of funky.
Yeah.
And this is a tune that actually was just introduced to me not too long ago by saxophonist Roger Paulin, but he had learned it from the composer Ed Frank, a wonderful, he just passed, but a wonderful New Orleans pianist, arranger, composer, and don't get mad at me if I got it wrong, Roderick, but I think the name of it is Fruit Punch.
Oh, nice.
I think that's what it's called. But before we do that, so if people want to keep following you, obviously they're going to find you on YouTube, Instagram, but where else? Website,
Yeah, JacobDupreMusic.com. Okay. And, it features a lot of the stuff you'll see on those other sites. So, most likely Instagram likes the videos I make. TikTok, maybe it's because I'm a millennial. I'm too old. I'm hit or miss.
If you're old, how does that make me feel?
But you can see a lot of the same things on TikTok. So if you love TikTok, you can follow me there and check that out. But hopefully, you'll see me playing somewhere. Yep. Maybe doing another tour again. We'll see where it goes.
Hope so. Yeah.
So, man, yeah, I'm looking forward to playing again because I'm gonna have my clock back. You're like, you probably noticed like my I guess it's hard to analyze yourself, but my sort of solo playing tends to be a little perhaps on the zany side, and it's always fun to play with people that I feel like ground me. You've got that thing.
One thing
clock thing, man.
I was going to comment when I heard you play the Henry Mancini tune. One thing that's such a joy, unless to anyone who plays solo jazz piano in particular. One of the, as you already know, I'm preaching to the choir, but one of the difficult things is to assimilate the rhythm section by yourself.
Yes.
Of course, a huge part of that is just the groove.
Yeah.
And, it was so easy. You were doing all kinds of stuff going all over the place, rhythmically changing things, but the clock was there.
Oh.
So
Glad to hear that. Because I feel like I talk about this to students sometimes. I was kind of a late bloomer with metronome practice, but now I'm a metronome Nazi because my brother and I were talking about this the other day. It's like if you're not doing that, you're not really playing because that's you're kind of always practicing without that guide to keep you honest, and you need
the
that.
Governance.
You got to have somebody keeping you honest about those kinds of things.
Well,
But anyway, we could go on. This will be the next episode.
there you go. And hopefully there will be another one in the future.
Yeah,
So.
I hope so too.
Okay, so fruit punch.
Love it.
How about
Move this now.
you take the first solo.
Alrighty, man.
So 1, 2, 1, 2. I guess it would help if I had some. Oh, it died on me. There we go. We're in business. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
As I say, that's the jazz.
That's the jazz, right? Improvising.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge would like to acknowledge our generous sponsors, the Shell Corporation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development, and the City of Baton Rouge.